something about Prince Louis has changed. And this time, it wasn't just another playful royal moment that caught the world's attention. It was the way the Wales family appeared together, and the message hidden in that ordinary-looking appearance may be far more important than it first seemed. Because while millions were watching Prince William, Princess Catherine, Prince George, and Princess Charlotte, one question kept getting harder to ignore. What kind of royal is Prince Louis growing up to become? For years, Louis has been known as the unpredictable youngest child of the Wales family, the little prince whose expressions could steal an entire royal event. But he's getting older, and the family is now entering a stage where childhood, public attention, and future royal responsibility are beginning to collide. What happened next offered a rare glimpse into how William and Catherine may be preparing their children for a future none of them can escape. And there is one detail about Louis that makes this moment especially fascinating. So stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why this seemingly simple family appearance could matter far more to the future of the monarchy than anyone expected. And if you enjoy compelling royal stories, hidden context, and the moments behind the headlines, subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss what comes next. Now let's go back to the moment that started raising questions. For years, Prince William and Princess Catherine have carefully balanced two very different responsibilities. On one side is the monarchy. On the other is their family. That balance becomes especially difficult when their children are involved. George, Charlotte, and Louis were born into a world where almost everything they do can attract attention. A smile becomes a headline. A wave becomes a viral clip. A funny expression becomes an international talking point. And a simple family appearance can suddenly become a major royal story. But there is a deeper issue behind all of this. How do you prepare children for royal life without allowing royal life to completely define their childhood? That question is becoming increasingly important for William and Catherine. George is growing closer to the responsibilities that come with being second in line to the throne. Charlotte is developing her own confidence and public presence. And Louis remains the youngest. His position is different. His future responsibilities will not be identical to George's. And that gives his parents a unique opportunity. They can allow him more room to discover his own personality before the weight of royal expectations becomes unavoidable. Perhaps that is why Louis has become such a fascinating figure within the younger generation. He doesn't always appear like someone who has been trained to behave perfectly in front of cameras. And that's exactly what makes him relatable. For many people watching from outside the palace, Louis doesn't look like a distant royal figure. He looks like a child who gets excited, a child who reacts naturally, a child who sometimes forgets that millions of people are watching. And that personality has become one of his biggest strengths. But it also creates a problem. The more popular Louis becomes, the more attention follows him. And William and Catherine have to decide where the line should be. How much should the public see? How much should remain private? And when should the children begin taking on more visible royal responsibilities? There is no simple answer. The monarchy depends on public connection, but childhood depends on privacy. And the Wales family has to protect both. That tension has become especially visible as the children appear more frequently at major public events. When the family attends an important occasion together, the public doesn't simply see 5 people standing in the same place. People immediately begin looking for clues. How has George changed? Is Charlotte becoming more confident? What is Louis interested in? How does William interact with the children? How does Catherine keep them comfortable? Every detail becomes part of the public conversation. But perhaps the most important thing is what happens when the cameras aren't focused directly on them. Because William and Catherine aren't simply preparing their children for one ceremony. They are preparing them for a lifetime. George will eventually have to understand constitutional responsibility. Charlotte may become one of the most important supporting members of the royal family. And Louis will have to decide what kind of public role feels right for him. That difference matters. The next generation of the monarchy cannot simply repeat the same formula used by previous generations. The world has changed. The media has changed. Social media has changed. And the relationship between the royal family and the public has changed too. A royal child today can become internationally famous before fully understanding why. That is something William and Catherine know better than most. William grew up under enormous public attention. He watched his mother experience the intense scrutiny that came with being Princess Diana. He experienced personal loss while still young. And he understands that royal life can bring pressures that outsiders never see. That experience may explain why he appears so conscious of protecting his own children from unnecessary exposure. But protection does not mean hiding them completely. It means choosing the right moments. And that appears to be the approach the Wales family is taking. Instead of placing the children at every possible royal event, their appearances can be selective. Instead of turning every family moment into a major public spectacle, they can allow the children to participate naturally. And instead of forcing them to behave like miniature adults, William and Catherine can let them remain children. That distinction could become one of the most important parts of their parenting. Because there is a danger in introducing royal responsibility too early. A child can begin believing that every public appearance is a performance. Every smile must be perfect. Every gesture must be controlled. Every mistake could become tomorrow's headline. That is not an easy environment for anyone. And perhaps this is why Louis's natural personality has become so valuable. His spontaneous reactions remind people that the royal family is still made up of real people. There is something refreshing about seeing a young prince react naturally rather than appearing perfectly rehearsed. And that could actually help the monarchy. Because institutions can feel distant. Traditions can feel formal. Palaces can feel unreachable. But a child laughing, smiling, or reacting with genuine excitement creates an immediate human connection. That is something no official speech can manufacture. Yet there is another side to this. The public may enjoy Louis's personality, but the family still has to protect him from becoming a permanent source of entertainment. That means learning when to step forward and when to step back. It means understanding that not every moment needs to be photographed. Not every expression needs to be analyzed. And not every part of childhood belongs to the public. This is where William and Catherine's approach becomes particularly interesting. They seem to understand that the monarchy needs visibility, but their children need boundaries. And finding that balance could determine how successfully the next generation handles public life. Think about George. He is already becoming more aware of his future. Unlike Louis, George cannot completely separate his childhood from the institution he will one day lead. Every year brings him closer to responsibilities that are difficult to imagine for someone so young. That makes the role of his parents even more important. They have to prepare him without frightening him. They have to teach him responsibility without taking away his childhood. And they have to make sure he understands that becoming king one day doesn't mean he has to stop being himself. Charlotte presents another interesting dynamic. She has often appeared confident during public engagements and has developed a natural awareness of royal protocol. But she is still a child, and she deserves the same opportunity to grow away from the cameras. Then there is Louis, the youngest, the most unpredictable, and perhaps the one with the greatest freedom to choose his own direction. That doesn't make him less important. In some ways, it could make his future even more interesting. Because Louis may eventually have the freedom to become something completely different from his older brother. He may pursue interests outside traditional royal duties. He may take on charitable causes that reflect his personality. He may become a supporting member of the monarchy in a way that previous generations could never have predicted. And if that happens, his childhood years will have prepared him for something extremely valuable. Knowing who he is outside the crown. That may be the greatest gift William and Catherine can give him. Not simply teaching him how to behave at royal events, but giving him the confidence to develop his own identity. Because titles can tell the world who someone is. They cannot tell a person who they are inside. And that is where family becomes so important. For George, Charlotte, and Louis, the relationship between them may be one of the strongest sources of stability in their lives. They are experiencing the same unusual childhood. They understand pressures that most children never encounter. They will share memories that nobody outside their family can completely understand. And as they grow older, those sibling relationships could become increasingly important. George may one day carry the crown, but Charlotte and Louis will still be the people who knew him before the crown, before the ceremonies, before the responsibility, before the history books. That is something incredibly powerful. And perhaps that is why seemingly ordinary family appearances matter so much. They show the public something that formal ceremonies cannot. They show the family dynamic. They show how the children are changing. They show how William and Catherine are adapting as parents. And they offer a glimpse into the future without revealing everything about it. The future monarchy is being built gradually. Not through one dramatic announcement, not through one massive transformation, but through hundreds of small decisions. Which events the children attend, which moments remain private, which responsibilities are introduced, which traditions are preserved, and which traditions are allowed to evolve. Prince Louis may not have a constitutional role comparable to his older brother, but his place in the family still matters. His personality matters. His relationship with George and Charlotte matters. And the way he grows up could tell us a great deal about what the modern monarchy eventually becomes. There is also something symbolic about Louis being the youngest. For decades, younger royal children often occupied a very different position. They were visible, but their lives were generally less predictable. Some became working royals. Others stepped away from public life. Some created careers outside the institution. Louis could eventually have similar choices. And that possibility makes his upbringing fascinating. Will he become a full-time working royal? Will he develop a role focused on a particular cause? Will he pursue a life largely outside the monarchy? Nobody knows yet. And that uncertainty is actually a good thing. Because Louis is still growing. His future should not have to be decided while he is a child. For now, the most important thing is allowing him to develop, to learn, to make mistakes, to discover what he enjoys, and to understand that his value as a person is greater than his position in the line of succession. That may sound simple, but for a royal child, it is anything but simple. Every generation of the monarchy faces the same challenge. How do you preserve tradition without becoming trapped by it? William and Catherine now have the opportunity to answer that question through their children. They can teach George responsibility. They can encourage Charlotte confidence. And they can allow Louis individuality. Together, those three qualities could create a very different kind of royal generation. A generation that understands tradition but isn't afraid of change. A generation that understands public duty but also understands personal boundaries. And a generation that knows the monarchy cannot survive simply by repeating the past. It has to remain connected to the people it serves. That is why moments involving Louis can become bigger than they initially appear. A simple smile, a playful reaction, a family outing, a few minutes in front of the cameras. These moments may seem insignificant, but they reveal something important. The next generation is already here. George is growing. Charlotte is growing. Louis is growing. And William and Catherine are growing into the role of preparing them. The monarchy they eventually inherit will not be exactly the same institution their parents inherited. And perhaps that is inevitable. Every generation leaves its mark. King Charles has his vision. William will eventually have his. And one day, George will have his own. But before that happens, there is a much quieter story taking place. 3 children are growing up. One is preparing for an extraordinary future. One is developing her own place within the family. And one is discovering who he wants to become. Prince Louis may still be the little boy who makes people laugh. But he is no longer simply the youngest child being carried into royal events. He is growing into a young member of the Wales family with a personality of his own. And perhaps that is why people are watching so closely. Not because Louis is expected to become king, but because he represents something different. Freedom, personality, and the possibility of a royal life that doesn't have to follow exactly the same path as the generations before him. Perhaps the real future of the monarchy isn't about making every royal look the same. Perhaps it is about allowing each member of the next generation to bring something different to the institution. And if William and Catherine can achieve that balance, their children could enter adulthood with something more valuable than perfect royal training. They could enter it with confidence, with perspective, and with a strong understanding of who they are. That may ultimately be the greatest responsibility William and Catherine have. Not preparing their children to look royal, preparing them to live royal lives without losing themselves. And that brings us back to Louis. The little prince whose expressions once became viral moments is growing up. The world will continue watching. The headlines will continue coming. The cameras will continue following. But behind all of that, there is still a family. A mother, a father, a brother, a sister, and a young boy discovering his place in a world that has already decided he is important. Perhaps the most interesting part of his story isn't what title he will carry. It isn't what palace he will live in. And it isn't what royal duties he may eventually perform. It's whether he will be given enough space to become Louis before the world expects him to become a royal. Because before the titles, before the responsibilities, before the crown, there should still be a childhood. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson hidden inside these seemingly ordinary royal moments. The future of the monarchy isn't only being shaped in palaces and ceremonial rooms. It is being shaped around family tables, at sporting events, during ordinary conversations, and in the small moments when three royal children are simply allowed to be themselves. One day, people may look back at these years and realize they were watching the next chapter of the House of Windsor take shape in real time. Not through one dramatic announcement, but through a family learning how to balance duty with childhood, tradition with change, and public expectations with private life. Prince Louis is still young. His future is still unwritten. And perhaps that's exactly how it should be. If you enjoyed this story and want more royal news, powerful analysis, and the untold context behind the biggest moments, subscribe to our channel and stay with us. Because the next chapter of the royal family is already unfolding. And sometimes, the biggest royal stories begin with the smallest moments.